morning. See, everyone's here to see my prediction for the Ohio State-Wisconsin game on Saturday. We're going to win, by the way, but thank you all for joining us. We are introducing this morning, in about a half an hour officially, the budget repair bill for the remainder of fiscal year 2011. It is important not only to balance the remainder of this fiscal year, as was outlined last week. The Legislative Fiscal Bureau outlined the state's challenges, paralleled in many ways what we had pointed out through the state's budget office to the Department of Administration. We are prepared to put forward a package that not only balances the budget for the remainder of fiscal year 11 through June 30th of this year, but also does so in a way that prepares us for the recommendations we're going to be making to the legislature for the next biennial budget, which will begin July 1. Overall, I'm going to walk you through some of the specifics, but first off, I want to stress, and I'm going to say this repeatedly because I want to make sure that those who are here in the media understand this and understand my feelings on this. I want to make it abundantly clear, as I've said time and time again, both throughout the campaign, in the transition, and in the just over a month I've had the honor of serving as the governor of the state of Wisconsin. We have good and decent people who work in state and local government, true public servants, professionals out there. There may be others who hear what we talk about today who will tie and somehow take that out of context. But the bottom line is I have great respect for the men and women who work as public servants at the state and the local level here in the state of Wisconsin. And I think when people look at the totality of what we're proposing, they'll understand that we have great respect, even in terms of the processes that we're using here today. As I said throughout the campaign, as I said again after the election in the transition, as I said in December when the state employee contracts were up for consideration, when I said the first week of my term here as governor, and what I said again a week ago at the State of the State address, we have both an economic and fiscal crisis in the state. When it comes to the fiscal crisis, the reality is that we have to get this current budget, the soon-to-be forthcoming budget, and budgets for decades to come in line. We can no longer kick the can to the future. That's just unacceptable. We can't expect our children or our grandchildren to pay off the debts of the states, and we have to get things under control so that we can continue to have a stable government, a government that's stable not only for the services we provide, but ultimately sends a message to our employers in the state that this is a good place to invest in and grow in because of the stability of our government at both the state and the local level. To that extent, part of that means, and by no means this is the only way we're going to be balancing the next two-year budget, it is a portion, a small portion, but a significant portion, means that we have to reform the wage and benefit process here in the state of Wisconsin. Again, the numbers I'm talking about today should be no shock to anyone who's been paying attention along the way in the campaign, during the transition, and in the time I've served as governor. I think most people can echo the numbers themselves. But what we're looking for in the budget repair bill is beginning April 1st, we're going to put in place for state employees the same provisions we're going to be hoping to continue with if the next biennial budget that we propose is approved, and that is asking for a very modest contribution from state employees that will help us generate approximately $30 million of savings in this fiscal year and about tenfold that amount of savings in the next biennium. And that is a contribution to the pension system of half of what the overall contribution is, which is about 5.8%. Again, that's about the national average, as I've pointed out before. We're asking for a health care premium contribution of just about 12.5% of the premium contribution. Again, that is about half of the national average. So I think when people look at this, particularly for people outside of government, they look at this and say this is a pretty good deal. Obviously, it's not easy. It's not going to be easy for any of us, myself, the cabinet, the legislators, anyone in state government, be they represented or non-represented employees. But I think when you look at the long-term savings, this is a key component to balancing our budget. The alternative, in this budget alone in fiscal year 2011, is to look at 1,500 layoffs of state employees, or up to 200,000, close to 200,000 children who would be bumped off of Medicaid-related programs. In the next biennium, if we were failed to make these changes, it would be the equivalent of anywhere from 5,500 to 6,000 state employees that would have to be laid off, and a similar number, an equivalent number of local government employees in both municipalities, counties, as well as teachers and others in school districts. I, for one, don't want to see anybody laid off in the state of Wisconsin. I think the last thing we need are any more people on unemployment. I think to that extent, these modest changes are reasonable, and so we're going to push forward with those. We think it's a viable alternative. I also want to stress to our employees at the state level in particular to begin with, that what we're proposing here, again, is very modest. It's something that will apply to all non-represented employees. It's something where we're in this together on it. There are also other changes included in this bill for state employees that I think will be beneficial to them, as well as things that are not in this bill. In this bill will be a change in terms of state employees not being required to be a part of their union and not being required to have payroll deductions. They can opt to be a part of a union, but they don't have to have those dues, will not have those dues automatically deducted from the payroll. And so for those who choose not to, this gives them an offset to the premium change and the pension contribution change. Another important element that I think is critically important for our state employees who've been through furloughs in past budgets is the fact that this budget repair bill, as well as the budget I'll present on the 22nd of this month, will not include furloughs for any state employees and essentially will not include layoffs. What we're doing are making fundamental reform changes in our wage and benefit structure, in our entitlement structure, and ultimately in our relationship with local governments. In addition, this bill, beyond the relationship it has with state employees, will essentially confer upon local governments, with the sole exception of fire and police at the local level and the state patrol at the state level, where they're exempted because we already have a tradition in the state of treating fire and police service differently in a variety of areas. We want to maintain that because that's key to making sure we can continue to have public safety as our core responsibility in the state, continue to be maintained. But for all other local governments, and I briefed them on this last night, our School Boards Association, our League of Municipalities, the Wisconsin Counties Association, our school administrators will be given the same flexibilities in terms of all those who are part of the Wisconsin retirement system, as well as Milwaukee County. Will be asked, as we're asking our state employees, to contribute half, which again is on average right now 5.8% to their pension contribution. And we'll be giving them the flexibility at the local level to make a health care contribution. We're not sending exactly what that is. Local governments will be given the flexibility. That is incredibly important because, again, anyone who's been watching across the country knows not only here in Wisconsin, we face about a $3.6 billion deficit we inherit for this budget, but all but 4 states across the country, to my knowledge, are also facing similar deficits in state government. In New York and California, you have 2 Democrat governors in those 2 large states who are cutting billions of dollars of aid from the state to local governments, to schools, and to their university system without giving them the tools to make up for those reduced payments from the state. Here in Wisconsin, it is our goal in the biennial budget, and it begins with the process set out in this budget repair bill. We want to give our local governments the tools to be able to offset what may potentially be reductions in state aid in each of the various local government categories, so that in turn they can make up for that by giving the flexibility, which, again, any of you know and lawmakers here know, local government officials have been asking for years, if not decades. This gives them the tools to do just that. The other change we make in terms of the collective bargaining process, we remove health care and pension contributions from collective bargaining. We maintain it for wages, but it's off the base wage, and it's capped at the CPI, again, for those covered in those categories. The context with that is if local governments or the state wants to go beyond that, they'll have to take that to the voters for a referendum. That gives them the backing to get local support for that. And again, it's one more tool to be able to balance not only the state budget, but to empower local government officials to balance their budget in the future. So this is a significant change. This is obviously a very bold and aggressive change. But I believe the people of the state elected me and members of the legislature to be bold and aggressive in the actions we take to help the private sector put people to work, and to be bold and aggressive in terms of how we balance the current fiscal year we're in, the next biennial budget, and the budgets that'll come into the future. And really, if you're going to do it, you got to tackle this issue. The couple other just things top of mind, again, to reiterate, this is not just a choice about this measure as to whether you do it or not. If we don't do it, the legislature does not do this either through the budget repair or through the budget bill. I think it needs to be very realistic about what the alternatives are. You're talking about massive layoffs at both the state and the local level. For those who might ask, why not bargain for this? Again, we're not negotiating over a budget. If you're going to negotiate and you're going to do it in good faith, you have to have something to offer. The state's broke. Local governments are broke. They don't have anything to offer. In addition to that, over the past decade, state employee contracts in terms of the negotiation process have on average taken 15 months. We don't have 15 months to negotiate at the state level. And when it comes to local governments, we cannot, my belief is, I don't want to have the uncertainty that some jurisdictions might have settlements that reach these numbers and others may not. We need to have the ability across the board for local governments to be able to control their own destiny. I think that's imperative as we look ahead to the budget challenges we'll face over the next 2 years of the biennial budget. So critically important that we do this. There will be some who will try to blow this into something that it's not. For us, we continue to respect public sector employees at both the state and the local level. The people who showed up yesterday and today for work, for professionals, I expect will continue to show up. We'll continue to do the great job that they do. We'll continue to care for the services that they provide. I have every expectation that will continue. And again, other than the fact that they, as well as everybody else, union or not, will be expected to help make a modest contribution for their pension and health care benefits. For them, that's fundamentally the modest change that we're talking about here. There may be some leaders in some of the unions who will be upset with this, but that's because the workers and their collective bargaining units will not be forced to be a part of this process, particularly at the state level. But again, that's the trade-off, and I think for our workers, they'll still have full rights when it comes to one of the most strongest strongest civil service systems in the country. They'll still have the rights that we afford our non-represented employees in terms of other benefits that are afforded for state government employees. That will continue. So for that, again, stress good, decent people who work for state and local government. We continue to honor and respect the service that they provide. Once this is approved and a part of the state statutes, they will continue to be treated with that respect, just as we all treat and legislators treat, Republican or Democrat alike, treat the staff that works in their offices who are not represented by unions. They treat them well. We'll continue to treat all of our employees in state and local government well as well. With that, I'll entertain questions.
How does changing the requirement about union membership save the state money?
In terms of that, it ultimately saves state workers who choose not to be a part of that money. So it's one more option, it's one more flexibility they have if they choose to invoke that to offset the premium contribution increases and the contribution to the pension system.
There's no fiscal impact in the budget.
It's all integrated, it's tied together in terms of the budget repair bill.
Why should it be any different for police, fire, state inspectors? Why should union rights be any different for any of them?
Currently, we've had a long-standing tradition when it comes to fire and police service in the state of Wisconsin. The statutes are very different when it comes to a whole series of rights and responsibilities, everything from retirement all the way through. The other part is we have contingency plans to account, and we don't expect this. I learned from county government in the past when it comes to emergency government and other factions, you prepare for the worst and you hope for the best. I hope and expect the best out of this, but I have contingency plans that we've been working on for months that would prepare for, whether related to this or anything else. We have plans to cover the state services that we provide. Those are things I don't want to take any chances on at the state, or excuse me, at the local level, and that's why it's imperative that we don't have changes when it comes to fire and police service.
Things like people like prison guards, though, fall into the same type of category as
No,
police
the
and fire?
the difference is I can account in my contingency plans for any actions that would take place at a state prison. I don't have the ability to do that at the local level when it comes to fire and police service.
What are those contingency Finance Governor, if there is some sort of the union leaders have been talking about the possibility of job actions which we strike?
Well, for us, the bottom line is, let me be clear, I think there is a tremendous gap of difference between a handful of union leaders at the state level and the vast, vast majority of professionals who work day in and day out in state government as employees of the state government. I would expect that when they get beyond the rhetoric they may hear from some, that in the end, when they look at what's actually in this measure and the fact that while they'll be asked, just like everybody else in state government will be asked to make modest contributions for pension and health care benefits, that in the end, when they look at things, and I've heard plenty of complaints even before taking office about furloughs, about layoffs, about other issues that tremendously irked our state employees, those do not continue under my biennial budget. When I think they look at the totality of this and that to avoid massive layoffs, we're making modest changes in terms of what we expect from all of our employees at the state level, represented or not. I think there will be some in the union leadership at the state level who will be upset, and we'll try and incite those individuals. But I have every confidence that the professionals who showed up yesterday and today will continue to show up because they understand that the choices we're making are to offset choices that I think are less positive being made in other states. New York, California, other states are looking at massive reductions that will cause layoffs of state employees, that will cause massive devastation of local governments and the employees all across the board, from teachers to firefighters to police officers and across the board. I think when people look at what we're offering, they'll view that as a much more viable alternative.
Talking about the National Guard, are they on alert?
We have, in state government, we have had, before I've taken office, plans for contingencies no matter what the circumstances. We have updated those. I got a full briefing from all the major level 1 state agencies as well as the National Guard yesterday. We are fully prepared and equipped to handle whatever may occur. So we have every confidence we can move forward on that. But again, you plan for the worst, you expect the best, and I expect from the good men and women who work for state and local government that they're going to continue to do the good professional job they do each and every day. They are prepared, just like they are prepared at any point for responding to whatever the governor, their commander-in-chief might call for. They're fully prepared for that. They're not called up at this point, and we obviously have a whole series of circumstances that would lead to that. I'm not anticipating that. I'm not expecting that. But I want to make everyone certain in the state that I'm fully prepared for whatever may happen.
What do you say to those who say political payback to exempt cops and firefighters since you got the endorsement of the Milwaukee unions and the Troopers Association?
I think that's utterly ridiculous because if I was, I'd only carve out those areas. The statewide police union, the statewide firefighter union endorsed my opponent. If I was rewarding political allies, it would be ridiculous to exempt them if that was the reason. The fact of the matter is we did it because there's a long-standing tradition. It's based on the fact that we expect, we have different expectations for our fire and police professionals. And I think long before I was here, there was an expectation that there could never be a gap in service when it comes to fire and police protection in this state. And we're making sure that that is something we can safely tell the residents of the state of Wisconsin will continue.
Why not Capitol Police? Why not exempt them?
Because in terms of the contingency plans that we have, they're based on interaction with local governments. The State Patrol does that, as well as our local fire and police departments.
Why not exempt the state police, i.e. DOJ, special agents, forensic analysts, DNR wardens, who arguably handle some of the largest cases that the state deals with?
Again, it goes back to contingency plans and how we work forward with the plans that we've set out, that were there and that we've enhanced over the last couple of months. But for us, remember, I mean, the key here is we plan for the worst case scenario, but I have every expectation that every one of our state employees are going to continue to show up and do the great professional job that they do. This is not taking away civil service rights. This is not altering employment. This is making changes in terms of the collective bargaining process so that we can accurately and effectively get the sort of modest changes we're talking about when it comes to health care and pension contributions. But we're not fundamentally altering working conditions or other things of that nature. And again, I have every expectation these are good, decent, professional individuals. They're going to continue to be good, decent, professional individuals working for the state and local government in the future.
How quickly will this happen?
What's that?
How quickly will this happen? How quickly will it go through legislature?
I briefed both majority caucuses yesterday. I made contact with, and then I briefed again today, both minority leaders of the Assembly and the Senate. I briefed local government officials last night. I briefed the superintendent of public instruction, the university system, and others. And I'm going to introduce the bill today at 10:30. We will extend the special session per the request of the legislative leadership, figuring that was the easiest way to move this forward. And my hope is that the legislative leaders would start acting on this early next week. It's really imperative because it really ties in to the biennial budget I'll be introducing on the 22nd of this month.
In the biennial budget, what do you plan to do about Badger Care?
There's a Badger Care. I'll be giving briefings about that. This bill doesn't have any impact on that, nor does it do anything, despite what was reported the other day in terms of senior care. But we'll be talking about that. We'll be briefing you closer to the 22nd on components of the biennial budget.
Time for just a couple of quick questions.
You campaigned and won on, cutting public worker benefits. What do you say to critics who are saying you didn't campaign on rolling back the budget?
For us, this all ties in together. You cannot, well, two things. At the state level, when you have on average over the past decade a 15-month delay in negotiations, there's no way we can wait that long and hope that we'd get this. I don't think there's any person alive in this state, particularly any person who works for the government, who didn't know all throughout the campaign, during the transition, and now what I expect when it comes to pension and health care contribution. Unless you were in a coma for the last 2 months or the last 2 years, everybody else, it was clear as to where I was headed with that. Having said that, because of the delay and the fact that we can't build a budget on something that's uncertain, but equally, if not of greater importance, we can't build a budget on the interaction and the reforming the interplay between state and local government on the hope that every jurisdiction, we know there'll be some that are more likely to get it than others, can't have the same ability to control their own destiny when it comes to local government's budgets. So this is imperative to make sure that that relationship between state and local government is strong. We've got to give them the tools to do that. And again, this is something that, again, unless someone's been asleep or out of the country, I don't think should be a shock to anybody. It would be a shock, frankly, I think, to most residents of this state if I stood here today and told you I wasn't going to do it.
With union leaders,
Because I don't have anything to negotiate. Good faith negotiation requires a give and take. We are broke in this state. We've been broke for years. People have ignored that for years, and it's about time somebody stood up and told the truth. The truth is we don't have money to offer. We don't have finances to offer. This is what we have to offer. And if you're going to negotiate, you got to have something to offer. We don't have something. So we're laying it out on the table. I think anybody who's watched me over the years, I was in previous office, and in the time I've campaigned, knows it's pretty simple. I identify the problem, I tell you what I think the solution is, and then I do it. It's exactly what I'm doing.
Got time for one more quick one. Can you get this to the Senate?
Yes, I have no doubt both the Assembly and the Senate understand just how significant this is. They understand that this is not just some litmus test. This is ultimately saying we have a choice. We can do this, or we can see thousands of public sector employees laid out. I don't think anybody in this state, whether they work in government or not, wants any more people in this state laid off. To me, this is a much better alternative. And I think when people have time to digest what the true consequences are here, I have no doubt that both the Assembly and the Senate will pass this quickly in preparation of our next state budget. Thanks very much for your time. Thanks, guys.